Hey, how's it going, everyone? This is Shane here again with my latest project. This is a sign I made for my dad. We've gone on Route 66 about 4 different times, so it holds a special place in our heart. Um, so I made him this. I got these wings here just to make it a little bit more interesting, and it's got LED lighting effects built in. I went with blue because my dad's colorblind, but he sees blue really well. So, and plus I think it looks pretty cool. It kind of gives it a hot rod vibe. I went with a special kind of black acrylic for these parts because regular black acrylic on its own is just going to block the light completely. So you want to get specifically, I'll link in the description the sheet that I got, but you want specifically a sheet that will actually, it has a little bit of translucency to it, so it allows a light dispersal. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to make something like this. So I started this out by designing it in Adobe Illustrator, and I've got about 3 to 4 different files that I use. I've got 2 for foam cutting, those go to the CNC. I had 1 for cutting out wood templates on our laser, and then the other for cutting out the acrylic sheet. So I decided to go with one of our hot wire CNCs for this, just to make sure all the foam was nice and accurate, because that's not required, but it makes things easier for something like this, that everything matches perfectly. Joe next door was nice enough to help me get that going. And going with a CNC, if you were going to mass produce something like this, that's going to be your best route. But if you're just doing one, for yourself, or like I'm doing this for my dad, you can still do it with one of our scroll tables, all the way from the original to the industrial scroll table. You would just need to either have a steady drawing hand to be able to draw a nice accurate outline, or be able to print some kind of templates, whether that's paper or wood. Either works. Wood works the best because it'll provide the most resistance against the hot wire, and then you can just drag the hot wire along. And I'll show how that works here in a couple of clips. Paper also works, though. It provides a little bit of resistance and gives you an idea of where you want to be cutting. If you're capable of printing like on longer sheets of paper, that works great, but wood's going to be the best. So now that I got all my pieces cut out of foam, what I'm going to do is glue this top layer down with some foam fusion. That's the best choice when you're going with foam on foam because it gives the strongest foam on foam bond. It literally fuses the cells together. Now I just gotta line it up. Alright. Looks like it's good to go. Now I'm gonna grab some stuff to weigh it down with. That just gives it an even stronger bond. Then while it's drying, if I step away and something happens, it won't get knocked over. So next up, I'm going to cut these 2 pieces to about 1/4 of an inch thick. Got it measured out here, so it should line up properly with the wire. And this way there'll be plenty of room for the LED strip when I get to that point. So you want to just kind of take it slow, let the heat do the cutting. Alright, that's one piece. Now this one, because it's so much taller, is going to be a little bit tricky. You really want to go slow with this because it can shift on you just because of the height. Alright, that's good to go. Alright, so the next step is to cut out the negative space for the lettering on these two pieces. I just had Brandon next door in the CNC shop help me cut out these wood templates here. They came out really nice. And I'm just going to use the 3-inch hot knife to basically cut all this out. As you see, I had a front and back cut. That's just going to help me keep it nice and smooth and accurate. And then I just used some Scotch tape to tape it all together. So, you know, just for each letter, you just kind of plunge somewhere in the middle, and then you make your way to the edge. And you just kind of follow the edges. Alright, there's that piece. Alright, the bigger pieces should actually be easier because there's not as many little details. Alright, that's that piece. And there we go. So now we have to cut out the inner parts for some of the letters. These are going to be a little bit more complicated. I'm going to use the scroll table. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the wood cutouts from that and just kind of press them into these pieces of foam because they're already cut to the right thickness. When you press it in, it will leave a little bit of an indent. That'll help them kind of stay in place because I can't really tape them down. Okay, so first what I'm going to do is separate all these little segments just to make it easier. Alright, let's get started. Okay, there we go. That's all the little inner pieces. Alright, so we can start coating now. What I'm going to use is mostly bounce with a little all-purpose foam coat. So how I usually do it is I'll start with a 1:4 ratio. So I got these little measuring cups here, and I have two. I keep them separate so that the little remnants of the all-purpose foam coat won't mix with the bounce. So we'll start by just filling this all the way to the top. Okay, that looks good. And then we're going to put that in our mixing cup here. And now for the bounce, I just kind of give it a little bit of a jostle just to make sure it's all good to go. And so we're going to need 4 cups of this, and then we're going to see what the consistency is like when we get there, because you do want it to be a little runny, but not too much. And then we'll start mixing it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start painting this on here and testing that out. Just to see how that goes. So I got all this sitting just on a kind of junky block of foam here. That feels like a pretty good consistency. And then I just kind of set them on thumbtacks because it gives it a nice even surface to sit on where it's sitting above the block. And this way the foam coat won't adhere it to the block, because it will adhere it a little bit. Okay, so now we have the little pieces here. Alright, I'm gonna set those aside and move on to the big piece. So I forgot to start recording with the last clip, but now we're coating the big piece, and even though we've got more surface area to cover, this is actually going to be easier because there's not as many fine details to try and get just right. You know, there's nothing to really avoid. The only thing is we want to try to minimize how much we get in this center area here. This is where the LEDs are going to go. And really, if you get some in there, you just kind of flatten it out, because the main problem is you just don't want a lot of bumps and things getting in the way of the light, basically. So let's go ahead and get this going. Alright, now we can move on to the sides, and the sides are the tricky part with bounce because of the consistency. It tends to drip, but if you just kind of keep reapplying it, it'll stay on there. Yeah, that covers everything. So I went to check on it. It wasn't quite cured yet. It had only been a couple hours, but it was dry to the touch. And I just noticed it was thin in a couple spots, so I decided to mix up another batch and just give it another once over. This time I went with 2 parts all-purpose to 3 parts bounce. So that makes it a little thicker, and it just helped me cover up the places that the foam was still kind of peeking through. And I did that for both this the large part and then the smaller parts here. Alright, so we're all dry and good to go here. Now we just got to cut off these little droplets that are sort of hanging off the bottom here. I usually just use a pair of scissors, but you can use an X-Acto knife, or you can even use one of our hot knives. Alright, that should do it. Okay, so now we're moving on to painting. And this should be pretty simple to paint. It's just going to be black and white. You know, just like the standard Route 66 signs. So I've just got some acrylic craft paint here. And I'm going to start with the sides. And what I'm hoping is, because the sides are going to be black, I'm hoping that means I won't have to paint this interior here, which would normally prevent the LEDs from bleeding through the sides. Since I'm going to paint the outer side black, though, that should be enough. But I'll test that before I glue everything together just to make sure. So that's all the edges there. So I'm going to set this aside. And then what I have to do with these is paint the underside black and then paint it white after that dries, because the light will bleed through these pieces. Okay, that's the end of that. Now I'm going to let this all dry, and then we can start painting the white parts. Alright, so the black has pretty much fully dried here, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with painting the white parts. I'm going to get these edges first because that'll be the most complicated, because I don't want it to spill over onto this side and cover up that black. that's that. So before I can paint the front face on these pieces, I have to repaint the back part in white. Like I said earlier, that's just so that the light reflects on it better. Alright, so the light was bleeding through on the sides here a little bit when I tested the LEDs out. So I gave it another coat, and then I added these stripes here on the wings. So hopefully that's it for this part. Now I should be able to start painting these. Okay, everything's all dry now, so we're going to go ahead and attach the LEDs. So I get these strips here that already have a power cord attached because I don't want to deal with any soldering or anything like that. And these already have like an adhesive backing, but I still like to put just a little bit of styro goo here and there just because I'm a little paranoid, because if it does come undone, there's no fixing it once it's done. Okay, so I just stick the cord through this little slot I have here. This is where I had the CNC wire enter to cut out the center, and I specifically did it for that reason. And off this strip here, and then before I start, I'm going to go ahead and just put my little bits of styro goo here and there. I'll put one there, one here. And you don't need much, just every now and again. Okay, that should be good. And for this strip, you just want to, it's got little marks on it, you just want to kind of cut the middle there. Yeah, let me just make sure I didn't screw it up. Alright, now we just have to wait for the acrylic sheet to come in. Okay, so before the acrylic sheet gets here, I've got a little space here to cover up. And for this, I just use some foam clay. And you don't need much, but what you do have to remember when using this stuff is as it dries, it shrinks. Alright, that should be good. And once that dries, I'll paint over it just to make it all look nice and even. So one issue I thought of is, since there's not anything in the center here, there's a chance that when something hits it, if it were to like fall over or something, that this could cave in, both of these pieces. So what I'm going to do is take these were basically the other halves of these little sheets before I cut them down, and I'm just going to cut little segments out of them and just kind of glue them right here in the center just to be support pieces basically. Alright, we've got all our acrylic pieces cut out now. So I've got some styro glue on me just in case these aren't quite a press fit. I think some of these inner parts are going to be the problematic pieces. But let's see, yeah, like that one's going to need to be glued in. So let's do that. Okay, now I'm just going to let those dry for a bit. Alright, I think these pieces are dry enough, so let's go ahead and fit the rest in. Okay. Alright, that's that. And with that, it's all done. The last thing I did, I didn't get a chance to film it. I had Brandon in the CNC shop next door help me solder another light strip that kind of goes down the middle here. Just because I think you could see in the video in the center, the LED light was a little dull. Just because that's kind of like the edge of where the LED reaches. I tried a few different methods to get the light to reflect, you know, trying tin foil, stuff like that. They helped a little bit, but it was still pretty noticeable. So I got that strip in there, and that makes it look a lot nicer. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a good one, and happy foam crafting.